Hello, welcome. We are here to discuss the patch notes for Warcraft 3, patch 1.30, which is on the PTR currently, but probably won't take that long before it goes live, because the last one didn't. And the current latest patch is 1.29.2, but we're going to be moving into 1.30 going onwards. So if this is news to you, then sit back, relax, enjoy as we discuss through the changes, because there are many of them. And we're going to begin with the humans, with their Archmage. His hero has been changed, Water Elemental, level 1. Decreased hit points, increased damage. And the same goes forward for level 2 and 3. I'm going to go over these changes pretty quickly, my thoughts, opinions, pros, cons for each one, because there's a lot of changes and I don't want this video to be too long. So what we'll do is we'll take a look at this very quickly. This, in my opinion, is basically a stealth nerf. It's a stealth nerf because the health is actually more important for the Water Elemental than the damage. Even though versus bad players this might be a buff, if you see what I mean. The Water Elementals aren't being dealt with. But typically Water Elementals, because there's such a high health pool, like 900, it makes them very difficult to dispel. It takes at least 3 dispels, sometimes more, depending on what's dispelling them. And yeah, they're super tanky, which is what I think players find more annoying. So by upping the damage, Blizzard have compensated for some of the health they've reduced. But Water Elementals, I could imagine them just losing the health and not getting damage. So the fact they're getting a damage boost is kind of surprising to me, because they're actually very good. So those are my initial thoughts. Kind of a stealth nerf, but really minuscule. Doesn't hurt human too much, but it does hurt them enough. And that's going to be the theme for the human. You guys, I want you guys in the comment section to let me know what your thoughts are as we go through these changes, which race you think is the strongest now, which race is the weakest as we go through. And I'm going to have Twitch chat as well, piping in a few notes every now and then. I'll try to keep an eye on them, what they're saying. So we've got Brilliance Aura. This is a big nerf indeed. A level 2 is reduced from 1.5 to 1.25. And what level 3 is 2.25 to 1.75. And the main change for that is basically once human reach those high level triple hero combinations, they're almost unstoppable in some situations, because Archmage, Mountain King, Paladin are just, they almost have unlimited spell power. And that's where Brilliance Aura is getting nerfed the hardest, at level 3. It's not touched at level 1. At level 2, a little bit. At level 3, quite a significant point. It's not enough to make it unplayable by any means. You'll still see Archmage being used all the time. But it does make a bit of an impact on the human that wants to sort of have a really nice, comfortable late game when they've got almost unlimited mana for Storm Bolts, Thunderclap, Holy Light. So those are my thoughts there. Mass Teleport, increased area of effect from 700 to 800. I quite like this change because Mass Teleport is one of those spells where you actually have to be very close. 700 range is an archer that's been upgraded, I believe, but basically if you think like a typical archer, rifleman, those kind of guys, they hit at 600 range. So imagine how far it takes for them to hit something, and then all the units inside of that radius get teleported just a little bit onwards. So by increasing it to 800, it makes it a little bit more comfortable to mass teleport with all your units and not leave 1 or 2 behind. So that's nice for mass teleport. I'm surprised mass teleport got changed in any way, shape or form. It's a very strong ability. Militia, decreased duration from 45 seconds to 40 seconds. Better make the most of those 5 seconds. It seems like a bit of a harsh nerf, considering some of the maps that are on the ladder still seem to have very long travel times towards expansions for humans, and their militia time really counts when they're going for the expansions. But I kind of understand why they've done that. It's to stop humans from being so aggressive in certain circumstances versus Night Elf or perhaps even Orc. And they travel vast distances across the map to then place towers in their opponent's base. So by decreasing the time by 5 seconds, that could make or break quite a lot of situations. It seems like a small thing. It is a small thing, but it's a small thing that could count. It basically makes it easier and buys more time for the Night Elf player or something like that before the militia reach their base, and they can have more time to slow them down. That's what I think anyway in regards to that. And it doesn't matter too much because militia are typically supposed to be used for defense purposes, sitting inside of their base, so they don't need to be on 45 seconds because they can just come back to their base and go back into militia form very quickly. Footman, defend. Defend consistently reflects damage from piercing attacks again. Well, that's nice to know. The damage reduction, though, is reduced from 50 to 40, and reflection damage reduced from 100 to 90%, so it seems like a bit of a strange stealth nerf again in a sort of way. It's not that stealthy, it's just a tiny nerf. Reflection damage is no longer a guarantee. So you want to base it on RNG with 10% to spare. Seems odd to me to even make any changes to defend. In some circumstances, defend can be very powerful. However, footmen are typically a bad unit, and you don't want too many of them from the mid-game onwards. So it's not like it's overpowered in any way, shape or form. It's really necessary for humans sometimes to fight versus Undead or Night Elf, who are putting pressure on them whilst they're putting up their expansions. So I'm surprised at that one. Priest Dispelled nerf. Increased cast range from 500 to 600. That's nice. Not a huge deal though. Never was a big deal. Added a 5-second cooldown. That's nice. Not a big deal though, because typically a human player will have 4 to 5 priests. Maybe even more. So they'll be spamming Dispel, and the way it works is it will go in rotation. Priest 1 Dispel, Priest 2 Dispel, Priest 3 Dispel. And that's probably enough. 3 or 4 Dispels is what you would typically spam on your opponent if they put down a bunch of summons or something like that to wipe out their summons. So you typically would have 4 priests anyway. So the cooldown doesn't make too much of an issue. You're not really using one priest individually. Go dispel, dispel, dispel. It's split between all of them. They do it like immediately because they work together. This also applies to Doomguard, Summoned, Pandaren, Brewmaster. So those units, the Doomguard and the Pandaren Brewmaster, really the hero abilities, they also have the ability to dispel, and that effect here affects them as well. Spellbreaker, this one makes sense. Spellbreakers are quite annoying. Nick says, I think that 90%, it reflects 90% of the damage taken, not 100%. Yeah, I think that's what I said, wasn't it? So now they reflect 90%, leaving a 10% chance for them to not reflect. Spellbreaker, Spellsteal, cooldown increased from 3 seconds to 6 seconds. That means that they won't be spamming Spellsteal quite so much. When you've got 3 or more Spellbreakers, typically humans can have up to 6 to 8. They will just be going shung, shung, throwing up the spear or whatever it is that the Spellbreakers use as their weapon. And yeah, stealing a lot of buffs and whatnot. So that's probably a necessary change. It doesn't nerf the human too much, but it does stop them from basically taking all of the opponent's buffs, like, immediately. What a human will do is they'll approach their opponent, attack move, because it's auto cast, or they can manually do it, which would be better, but a lot of people will just attack move, steal a whole bunch of spells very quickly, and then walk backwards. And you can kind of rinse and repeat that. Again, you have the power of doing that with abilities like slow. Whole chat is now saying I'm wrong. Okay, let's have a look, shall we? We're going to go back up to the defend. I'm not entirely sure how this works. So what's the issue here? It's not the chance to reflect, it's the amount of damage reflected. Reflection damage reduced. Oh, I see. My bad. Yeah, you're absolutely right. This is why I got you guys also correcting me. So I might make a mistake when it comes to how we look at these things. So the damage reduction is reduced from 50 to 40%. Oh, so this is a buff, is it? Damage reduction reduced from 50 to 40%. So the damage taken whilst they have defend active reduced from 50 to 40. But that's the damage reduction, so shouldn't that be a nerf? That part should be a nerf. But reflection damage should be a buff. Okay, that's just really strange. Like, it's such a strange little change. Reflection damage reduced from 100 to 90. So the damage reflected from the shield back onto the Dryad or the Archer is reduced. Oh, I see. So it is still just, they're both nerfs. Okay. But it says defend consistently reflects damage from piercing attacks again. I didn't realise it didn't. So that one, yeah, the whole thing is kind of a little confusing, but I think we've understood it now. With defend up, you reduce piercing damage taken by 50%. Patch changes that to 40% reduced damage. It has a 30% chance to reflect damage. The reflected damage... So maybe that was a bug then. Defend wasn't consistently reflecting damage when it should be reflecting damage. Even though there's only a 30% chance. Alright, let's just move away from that one, because I don't like that one at all. Okay, now we're looking at Mortar Team. Decreased half damage radius from 150 to 100. And decreased quarter damage radius from 250 to 200. So if you guys are unaware what that looks like, when you basically go to attack ground with a mortar team, you will have a highlighted blue circle. And there will also be a smaller blue circle within the bigger blue circle. So the smaller blue circle should be the quarter damage, and from there onwards, like the middle of the circle is basically the focal point, and then it goes like half damage onwards, so quarter, half damage, etc. Well, full damage, half damage around it. Imagine like an arrow. You know, when you're shooting an arrow at a board, and you've got like you got like 100 points in the middle, then 50 points in the middle circle, and then 25 points on the outer circle. It's a little bit like that. And what they're doing is they're reducing it. So they're actually nerfing mortar teams quite a lot, you'll see as we go through. Reduced half damage radius. So again, the radius is being reduced, just making it tighter, so you have to be even more precise with your shots. I think it's because Dryads sometimes clump up a little bit, but they're not always super close to one another. However, when you've got the upgrade with fragmentation shards, it still splashes very largely, and you can kill like 3 to 4 Dryads in like one shot. Not from one mortar, but like one volley from like 3 to 4 mortars. So that's why they're making those changes. Specifically, I think, is versus Night Elf more than any other race. Increased quarter damage radius from 250 to 275. Reduced bonus damage for half damage radius. Reduced... Well, we're going to go into too many numbers here, but basically it's a huge nerf. Flying Machine. Increased hit points from 200 to 250. Increased gold cost from 90 to 100. And increased damage from 14 to 15 to 18 to 19 versus air only. Whoa, what a buff. Yeah, this is probably the only buff the humans are going to get, and it's not exactly a good one. It helps them versus destroyers, which is... This is the bigger buff, really, is flat cannons now being available with keep. It means that you can build flying machines at tier 2 versus destroyers, but you don't have to wait until tier 3 before you can actually do any significant damage to them, because flat cannons is going to splash, and the undead, if they're playing well, should be massing destroyers versus human, because it's incredibly strong. So the more of them they have, the more impact flat cannons is going to have. This is a change that most of you are going to be interested in, though. This one specifically, the siege engine. Increased supply cost from 3 to 4, because most of you will probably play 4 versus 4 RT and stuff like that. So this means that you won't see quite as many siege engines in games. You will still see them, and they are still incredibly strong because their cost hasn't changed. It's just their supply. So what it basically means is you'll probably see 2 less siege engines, 2 to 3 less siege engines by the 50 food mark. By the 80 food mark, perhaps it's 4 to 5 less siege engines. Do you see what I mean? Because they can't quite fit in that many siege engines, but there's still going to be a lot of them. Improved masonry. Increased the cost from 100 gold and 25 to 125 gold and 50. It's pretty expensive for human, but not that bad, really. That's pretty reasonable, I think, considering how good improved masonry is. What improved masonry is it's the armor on your buildings, and it's the health on your buildings. So when you upgrade improved masonry, the health of your towers will go up, and the armor of your towers will go up. So it's actually a really important upgrade, and a lot of human players actually don't get it because they probably don't realize just how much it does. It doesn't just increase armor, it increases health as well. So they're just increasing the costs so that you're putting more effort into it. Ivory Tower increased the lumber cost from 20 to 25 and reduced the stock from 3 to 2. It means that you can't just whack 3 of these onto your hero and go to your enemy base. You can only put 2. It's not exactly a huge nerf, but it stops human being so aggressive with their towers to some degree. Now, are you ready for the biggest buff of them all? This is it now. Orb of Fire. Increased hero bonus damage from... I'm going to laugh so much for us, really. From 5 to 10. Increased splash damage radius from 140 to 150. But they increased the gold cost from 275 to 325. It's such a nerf. It's technically a buff, an extra 50 gold, but it's still awful compared to the other orbs. Not even close. It's awful. Just change how it works entirely. It doesn't have to be fire. It can be something else. It can be arcane. It can have the chance to slow on hit. Something like that. It's just... It's not good. It's not good. There's no human hero that really benefits that much from it either. It's not like there's Blade Masters going, oh yeah, plus 10 damage, please. Only the Mountain King, maybe, but it's so terrible. Orc. Heroes. Blade Master. Reduced agility from 24 to 22. And able to pass through intended items. So that's a fixed bug, I think. Although, ironically, I had a bug earlier today where I played. And my Blade Master got stuck behind peasants' collision size. Despite being in Windwalk form whilst chasing through an Archmage. So I actually couldn't move through the peasants despite the pathing being clear because the Archmage had just moved from it. Through that position. But I couldn't because I was blocked behind peasants whilst Windwalked. So there are still some strange bugs going on with Blade Master. But I assume that's like a one-off and it's pretty hard to replicate. The Blade Master reduced agility from 24 to 22 is nice. I actually wanted to test this to see how this would impact Blade Master trying to do the Ogre Camp on Turtle Rock and seeing if he's able to do it. The top position is very difficult. You typically need 2 Windwalks, but I'm curious if he can still do it in the bottom position. I would make the assumption that he definitely can. Actually, I don't think it does need testing. I think he can still do it, but the top position is still tough. So what this does is it just means that basically the Blade Master has 0.6 less armor, although I think he gets a little bit more for it, but 0.6 less armor. So he might reduce his armor by 1 if it works in a situation of rounding up. He has 4% less attack speed. Yes. And 2 less damage. Which really doesn't change the Blade Master that much, but I think it's a welcome change. And I've actually swapped to playing Orc now. And I don't mind this nerf. Because I still think Blade Master's still God tier, regardless of this. Now, this is where playing Orc gets a bit more interesting. This might develop a new meta. I don't know if it will, but it would be awesome to see Torrent Chieftain and Headhunters become a possibility in 1 versus 1. Headhunter increased hit points from 350 to 375. Extra 25 health. Increased regeneration 0.8 to 1.0 hit points per second. So that's a 20% buff there, which is lovely. It just means that microing your headhunters and pulling them back, they're going to get a bit more health regeneration. So if you try to mitigate the damage and spread it out, it's pretty cool. Basically, you get robbed of a circlet, says Frostwolf. That's a very good point, yes. You almost get robbed out of a circlet with the reduced agility. So it just stops the Blade Master's power level at the start being so strong. But he still benefits a lot from agility as he levels up. He gets 1.7, I think, or even 1.75 per level he gets into agility. Berserker increased hit points from 450 to 475. So that's the upgrade for Headhunters. So their health pool goes up to 475. Which isn't a massive amount, but it's not bad for a 2-food ranged unit when you think about it. Decrease the damage... Oh, this is a good one. Decrease the increased damage debuff from 50 to 40%. Seems like a small thing, but it's actually quite nice. It means that you're not going to get so punished for going into your additional attack speed. Because they gain faster attack speed at the cost of taking additional damage if hit, whilst activating their Berserk mode. Bat Riders. No one understands this one. I think I breezed over it the other day when I went over these changes and didn't realise, but in hindsight, yeah, I don't know why this is happening. Bat Rider, increased bonus damage from 13 to 15 to 16 to 18. That's actually a pretty big buff. It's not like 14 to 17. It's 16 to 18. The siege damage they do is pretty intense, so just a few extra numbers on each bat is going to make quite an impact. It's particularly in 4 versus 4 RT. Good luck, Night Elves. Reduce the attack speed debuff from 80% to 60%. So what this means is, when they attack a tower, this doesn't work on human towers, but it works on all other towers as far as I know. The tower will attack at 20%. It will attack like, it will attack 80% slower. So, you know, 5 times slower in a way. I don't want to get into numbers, I'm not very good with them, but yeah, this just helps the towers attack a bit more, the bats, so it's kind of makes sense to sort of say, well, if this person's got this many towers, they should deserve to keep their base and not get absolutely obliterated. But I don't think Bat Riders needed a buff, to be quite frank with you. Just because you don't see them that often doesn't mean they're not bad. So Shaman increased the hit points by 15, increased the bonus damage 8 to 9 to 10 to 11, and mana regeneration increased by 0.05. A tiny buff to Shaman. It's nice, but I don't think you're going to see people build them because of this, even with the Purge being reduced to 65 mana. Perhaps Purge should be 50 mana. Then people would consider them, because part of the main reason why people go for Spirit Walkers so much is because Disenchant, I think it's 125 mana, but it's an AoE dispel. Whereas Purge, as you can see, costs 75. Now it's going to cost 65, but it costs like half as much, but it's only single target. I don't know whether the Purge dispels more than Disenchant though. But at any rate, this is nice for Shaman. It's better than nothing. Witch Doctors, their mana regeneration increased a little bit. They don't need much though, Witch Doctors, so that's fine. This is where it gets weird though. Tauren Totem now unlocks with Stronghold instead of Fortress. So you can build your Tauren Totem at tier 2, but I'm pretty sure you won't be able to get your Tauren until tier 3. Think how it used to work in Reign of Chaos. Well, maybe you can. It doesn't say that you can't. Maybe you can. But in Reign of Chaos, you used to have to get tier 3 to get Abominations. You could get your Slaughterhouse at tier 2, but you couldn't access Abominations, if I remember correctly, until tier 3. So maybe it works that way. So you can see your Tauren, but you can't click on them until you get tier 3. But I don't know for sure. Now trains Spirit Walkers and Spirit Walker upgrades. So Spirit Walkers are going to be moved from the Spirit Lodge into the Tauren Totem. This means that Orc, if they want to get Spirit Walkers, will need to build a Tauren Totem instead of the Spirit Lodge. Tauren Totem, I think, is 225 wood though, and Orc typically have just about enough wood if they macro correctly and don't get harassed too much during the period to get a Spirit Lodge and a Bestiary and their other hero just sort of as they reach tier 2 onwards, shortly afterwards. So by increasing the amount of wood that it takes to get Spirit Walkers is kind of harsh for Orc, but I think they'll deal with this. It's going to be a strange change, but I think they'll get through this. Items. Scroller's Speed no longer applies to Goblin Sappers. For those of you unaware, you could apply Scroller Speed to Goblin Sappers, which would make them move at 522 movement speed, which is the maximum movement speed in Warcraft 3. It's very fast. Think Blade Master level 2 and 3 Windwalk fast. So what people would do, versus Undead particularly, is with their Blade Master or whatever hero, go to the Merc, not the Merc, the Goblin Laboratory. I can't say it, but you know what I mean. Pick up the Sappers, activate Speed Scroll, and send them into the Undead Cigarettes. It doesn't matter if they've got like Necropolis or Black Citadel firing slow, icy bolts at them, or the Rubian Tower, because when you've got Scroller Speed active, it ignores all slow effects temporarily whilst it's effective. So yeah, this was a necessary change because it was very cheesy, and I think it's only fair. It was a bit cheesy. It's not always the easiest thing to do, to be in the right place at the right time where you've got Scroller Speed and you're at the laboratory and they're not at their base. But when that happened, whew, I mean, even if they were at their base, with the Scroller Speed you had the potential to get the Sappers in there before they could react properly. So a necessary change. Now, Reinforced Defenses, reduced from 200 to 150 lumber, and it unlocks with Stronghold instead of Fortress. I think this is by far the biggest change out of all of the changes you're going to see today, and there's a lot of them. This is really going to change how I think some games are played. You think that sometimes human can be aggressive at tier 2 with towers whilst towering their opponents and putting them over the map. Think what Orc are going to be able to do now. Setting up those towers quite comfortably, and then having the fortified armor to protect them. Mortar teams being nerfed. not being quite so effective with their sort of splash damage and whatnot. So they won't be so good. So this is nice for Orc. Incredibly nice. I would be surprised if this doesn't get changed. It's really... I almost think there should be 2 tiers, okay, of reinforced defenses. Because I agree that Orc need this. Because as someone who's been playing a lot of Orc lately, what will happen is... Oh, Nick going on about the consistently reflecting attacks for defend was a bug fix. Okay, it was a bug fix. Right. Reinforced defenses. I reckon this is necessary, but there should be 2 tiers of it. I don't know exactly how you would make this work, though. I'm just trying to think. It should almost be a little bit like masonry. But a lot of opponents will rush to your base if you're an Orc player, or if you're against an Orc player, you should rush to your Orc opponent's base roughly about the time they're going to hit tier 2. And you just basically bring all of your heroes, all of your units, all of your summons, and right-click on the burrows. And it's insanely effective. Even if the Orc takes like 6 or 7 peons to repair those burrows, those burrows will still probably get killed. And there's really not much they can do to outplay it, other than just try to buy as much time before their burrows get destroyed. And one of the things I think that has the biggest impact on this is mercenary heroes from the tavern being instantly available once you hit tier 2. I think there should be a cooldown. An internal cooldown or something. Or not necessarily a build timer, but 30 seconds. Because typically it takes you 50 seconds to build your hero. But let's say 25 to 30 seconds after you hit tier 2, you'll have access to the tavern hero. Because what this does is as soon as you hit tier 2, you are at a power spike. Because you've just instantaneously picked up another hero, whilst your opponent is still probably on 1 hero, if they're getting their hero out of the altar. And not only is that hero instantaneous, but they're also halfway to the opponent's base. So they have a very small distance before they reach there with 2 to 3 quill beasts. And you can imagine the damage that ensues. Or a Fire Lord with lava spawns. It's a huge power spike, and it could easily be dealt with by just increasing the time that it takes to get that neutral hero from the tavern. So that's a change I would like to see. But yeah, going back to the reinforced defenses, I don't know how to... Because it's only doing one thing. It's changing your heavy armor to fortified armor. I feel like... What if the... I mean, this is overcomplicating it, but just say, for example, hypothetically, there was 2 tiers of fortified armor for Orc. One was... So, tier 0 is 2 fortified armor. And then tier 1, which would be like the highest tier, because you'd only have 2 researches that you can get at Fortress, you would be able to access the next tier. And that would give you 4 armor on your towers. Do you see what I mean? Do you see where I'm coming from? It gives you the fortified, but you don't get that armor, because I just wonder if this is too strong as it is. It almost needs to act like masonry does, in a way. If you're going to give that to Orc, you need to do... It's hard to change though, because it's only doing one thing and it's just changing instantly to... So what do you do? So if it goes to fortified armor, do you then reduce the armor? Because I don't know what the armor is of a burrow or a tower as standard. But... You see where I'm coming from. You see where I'm coming from. Let's move on to spiked barricades. It's nice. I never get this, but it's nice that it's been reduced. I mean, it's really expensive. Level 3, 275. Is that 275 lumber? Yeah. Whew. I mean, technically spiked barricades isn't that bad. It's just never picked up because Orc would rather spend their lumber on other things. Even when I've got copious amounts of lumber, I still don't even think to pick up spike barricades. But that's probably more on me than it is on the game needing it or requiring it. That's probably more that I don't actually actively do it, and I should get into the habit of doing it more. Okay, let's move on to Undead. The heroes. The Lich, the Frost Armor, reduce the slow duration against all units from 5 to 4. Very small nerf, but it's kind of necessary. Frost Armor is very powerful if used in the right hands. So when you're getting pressured by an Orc, which you definitely need Frost Armor versus, you will see, if you play 1 versus 1, by the way, and you play Undead, and you play against an Orc, you should be getting Frost Armor as your first ability, not Frost Nova. A lot of people will still go for Frost Nova because it just seems like the most sensible one to get, but Frost Armor is way stronger because it essentially means that you shouldn't lose your units, providing that the Blade Master is not completely stacked and you can micro. So what this does is it just means that units that attack your Frost Armored unit won't be slowed for quite so long, so they will be able to chase it a little bit more easily, but not by much. It's still very good. Units, upgrades, and items. Now, this is cool. I like these changes. I like it. I like it a lot, actually, because I was wondering how they're going to make Acolytes, because they're still the worst miners. At least peasants and peons, they go into the gold mine and disappear, and they can be microed out cleverly. Wisps are the best by far, because they just can't be hit unless they're out of the gold mine. But increase the hit points by 10. Increase the hit point regeneration while on Blight from 2 to 4. So this doubles their health on Blight. So if you're microing them whilst the Blade Master is attacking them, or Footmen are attacking them, whilst they're on Blight, which they will be, as long as you keep moving them, they'll heal a lot more reliably. And they've also increased the armor, so that means they won't get so crushed so easily. And their movement speed, so yeah, this is a massive buff for Acolyte. It just basically means that if the Undead micros correctly, they're far less likely to lose critical Acolytes. So those are sensible buffs. Sensible buffs. Crypt Fiend. Using Crypt Fiend's Burrow, unburrow, no longer resets the cooldown. So that was something that the top tier level players would abuse. I never would. But it means that when you burrowed, say for example a dragon's coming towards you, you web it. There's another dragon coming towards you. You burrow and then you unburrow, and you've got web available again instead of having to wait 6 to 8 seconds or whatever it is. So it's just like the best of the best players would use that ability, but it's not really a huge deal. Necromancer is going to get quite a lot of buffs, but I still don't know if it's going to get used until Dispel changes or is used differently. In 4 versus 4, way more applicable. But in 1 versus 1, I don't see it. Let's go over the changes, shall we? Raise Dead. Increased base summon duration from 40 to 45 seconds. So that means they last longer. Reduced damage from Unholy Frenzy. So you're no longer taking 4 damage per second. You're now taking 3. That's nice. 75% less, 66% less. I don't know. I don't want to do math again. Cripple. Reduced mana cost from 175 to 150. It's pretty good, but it's still probably the worst last tier, apart from possibly Polymorph. I still think Polymorph's better than Cripple, though, in a strange way, despite it costing so much more mana. Skeletal Longevity. Increased duration time from 15 to 20 seconds. So that means that they last longer. Increased gold cost from 50 to 75. Not a big deal. Pretty cheap anyway. 75 gold. Skeletal Mastery. Now unlocks with Halls of the Dead. So this means you can get the Skeletal Mages, which have piercing damage at tier 2. Which is really nice, because it actually means that Necromancer's time in attack will be much more effective. Because they're really the strong ones. The skeletons are good, but you want the ranged ones, so you've got more damage, more control, more anti-air. So being able to get the ranged skeletons at tier 2 means that you can actually do a proper sort of... Because it's a very niche thing. The longer the game goes on, and if you have to wait till tier 3, the more chance your opponent's going to have the appropriate dispel and resources for skeletons. So by making that tier 2, it actually means that it has more of an impact when it means to have an impact. Skeleton Warrior, just more health. Skeleton Mage, more health. That's always good. But I still think they can be dispelled like instantaneously by like 1 AoE dispel with those health ranges. I don't know whether you would reduce the damage they do, but just increase their health so they can't be dispelled so easily by 1 dispel. Obsidian Statue, reduced hit points. A bit like wolves. You know, wolves got buffed from the Farseer, so a detonate won't instantaneously destroy both the wolves. It'll still leave them with like 50 health. Obsidian Statue. Reduced hit points from 550 to 500. They're really vulnerable now. Because 550 sounds pretty reasonable, but they're actually quite easy to kill, particularly if you're an Orc Blade Master. It's quite surprising how fast you go for Obsidian Statues. Destroyers. Reduced hit points from 900 to 850. So this is nice. Because Destroyers are almost a god tier unit, depending on the situation. They're not always the best thing you can have, but if you're against human or very niche situations where your opponent doesn't have the proper answer to them with enough decent anti-air, they're flying, tanky, air units that are magic immune and can dispel. They're pretty amazing. So making them more of a glass cannon makes sense. And it's only 50 health. It's not a huge deal. Reduced Orb of Annihilation bonus damage from 20 to 15. This is more necessary. I'm surprised it didn't get reduced a little bit more. Because what they do is they absorb the mana of nearby obsidian statues. And then they morph those obsidian statues into destroyers. And you get 3 to 4 of them. And then you right click on human towers. Particularly the ones that are in the middle of the other towers. Which is why humans should stagger the towers with a gap in between. And they'll obliterate the towers. So this means it's going to take just a little bit longer to do that. But they'll still be good at it. Devour Magic. Decrease the damage against summon units from 180 to 160. Not a huge deal. But, you know, it's something I suppose to deal with them just having a free dispel. Because Devour Magic is their dispel. It doesn't cost them any mana. It doesn't cost them nothing. It's a pretty short cooldown. Death Knight's saying that with the Gyro buff, Destros are going to suffer more. Yeah, Gyrocopters got buffed. Destroyers got nerfed. It's a good thing for human. And it's one of the things that causes human the most glaring imbalance, if you know what I mean. It's one of the biggest imbalances in the game. For example, Orc versus Night Elf. Talons are just insanely good versus Orc. Just astronomically good. And the same was the case for Destroyers versus Human. Human just didn't really have a great answer to them when they needed it. They typically had to go to like late tier 2 or into tier 3 before they can properly answer Destroyers, which by then you're probably dead. So yeah, these are necessary changes in some way. Frostworm, now this is a good one. Reduced Frost Breath attack duration on heroes from 10 seconds to 3 seconds. That is a change that probably needed to be made for a long time. It's not something you would have noticed, but when it happens, it's devastating. You've ever had those situations where you've had a little engagement with your opponent and you've had to run away. You've done the damage you need to do. And you're running away and there's a Frostworm chasing you. And you are this close to just getting outside of the Frostworm's range. But he just about manages to hit you with his Frost Breath. Well, now you're slowed for 10 seconds, even if you're a hero. So the chances of you getting away is like 0. As soon as that Frostworm hits you once, you are out of it. You basically have to town portal or accept that your hero is going to die. So by making it 3 seconds, it gives the hero much more opportunity to run outside of the Frostworm's range again before getting hit, or at least using some sort of speed boost to get out of there. Or slowing the Frostworm. Buildings. Haunted Gold Mine. Reduce the blight damage, the blight radius. Blight damage. Could they make blight do damage to enemy units? How cool would that be for an upgrade? Sort of like decays their health by 0.25 every second or something. It's like a mini death and decay. Reduced blight, so you could put blight in enemies' bases and kill them over time with it. Creating new metas right here. Reduced blight radius from 960 to 768. So I think this is actually kind of a buff, even though that looks like a nerf. Because they've also reduced the gold cost, which is necessary, and the wood cost. Just by a little bit. Because gold mine is terrible for undead. Technically it's cheaper than getting a town hall, a tree of life, or a stronghold. It's not a stronghold, is it? Great hall. But it's way worse. It's way worse. Because the gold mine just sits on its own and it's so easy to pick off the acolytes. But with the changes, not so easy now. But what the blight radius does is it gives away your position. So some maps, if you expand at, say, Plunder Isle in the middle, you can see the blights when you're going down the sides of the map and not actually at the expansion. So it's a giveaway that someone's actually expanded there. And you go, oh, okay, I'm going to come back round then and go straight up there. So I think that's partly why they've done that. Sigurart's been increased health from 550 to 600, so that stops them from getting one shot by sappers, I think, now. It might require a sapper and then a couple of hits to kill them. So that's good. Also good versus siege engines. Death Knight says maybe Undead can get expansion more easily and go mass Necro wagon push on tier 2. I mean, that's wishful thinking. I still don't think you're going to see Necros, but they're more fireable than they were before. So upgrades. Cannibalize. This is something that's not going to affect anyone ever. Decrease the duration from 33 seconds to 20 seconds. So it means you don't cannibalize for so long, but it does mean that you get increased healing. So that's very nice. It's actually a necessary change. I think cannibalize is much more realistically going to be picked if it is a very short duration and a very high return of health. That way players can pull their units back, micro, and heal. But the danger of making the healing too high is it means that you wouldn't be able to kill the unit whilst it's healing. It would almost be out healing the damage you can put on it, which is kind of what you want with your cannibalize, but you don't want it so powerful that it negates focus fire. Because whilst you're focus firing a unit that's getting healing, you're probably got units that are getting killed that aren't getting healing. Do you see what I mean? So I'm interested in that change. I think that might make cannibalize a bit more interesting to try to utilize if ghouls weren't so crap, but at least with abominations you could try to give it a go. Disease Cloud. Increased damage from 1 to 2. Doubled the damage per second. And Disease Cloud is not bad. It lasts for like 2 minutes. And it will just tear away at the opponent's health. Natural healing and health regeneration will health mitigate versus it, but losing 2 health per second is typically more than the opponent will gain in terms of health regeneration. I think most units would probably have 0.5 health regeneration at most, maybe 1. Night Elf might even get 1.5 at night, but by making Disease Cloud 2 damage per second means that nothing can out heal it. But Disease Cloud can't kill a unit, it can only bring it down to 1 health minimum. It won't ever kill the unit, you'd still have to finish it off with something, but that's a good buff for abominations. Reduce the duration from 120 to 90 seconds. Ah, so it's no longer 2 minutes, but 90 seconds is still a really long time. So that's still good for abominations. That's definitely still a buff. Now generates Crypt Fiend Corpse instead of Ghoul Corpse, because again, no one likes ghouls. Well, people like them, it's just you can't use them because they're terrible. Exhume Corpse. So what this means is your meat wagon has an ability to exhume corpses. So if you have any corpses on the battlefield, you can pick these up with your meat wagon once it's researched. And what this means is if you use your necromancers, no, not your necromancers, I think your Death Knight to animate dead, it should create Crypt Fiends instead of ghouls. It's a small thing. I wonder if those Crypt Fiends get the buffs though from your other Crypt Fiends. Animated dead Crypt Fiends do. Yeah. Okay, items. Orb of Corruption. Decreased armor reduction from 5 to 4. I think this is one of the most necessary changes in the game. Undeads won't like it so much, but minus 5 armor was crazy. It's so good that it was actually a real challenge to work out which orb was more imbalanced. Orb of Lightning, the ability to purge and deal damage to summoned units, but also, more importantly, instantaneously slow a unit and bring them to a standstill, or even a hero. Or the ability to reduce a unit's armor by 5 with a Lich, a ranged hero that can very easily target, and then you focus fire that unit and nuke it down to the ground. So by making it 4 armor is a small change, but a big change at the same time. Just means Undead won't be able to tear apart units so easily, because they're very good at doing that with their fiends. Focus fire, Orb of Corruption, walk away, let your fiends attack, and then by the time those attacks come back to the fiends, they would have done tons of damage. Sacrificial Skull no longer requires graveyard to purchase. That's very nice. I'm really happy with that change, particularly for 4 versus 4 RT, because I can't tell you how many times where I've wanted to go for an expansion, and then I thought, oh, my graveyard's not going to finish in time. I've got to make a move. I've just got to do it. But then you go for the expansion. You take the expansion, but the acolytes are just standing there, not being able to build cigarettes, and you think, should I have stood behind and waited to get a Sacrificial Skull when the graveyard finished? But I couldn't really wait much longer. But then, yeah, this means you don't have that horrible decision. You don't need the graveyard, and it means you have the opportunity to go for an expansion much more easily as Undead. Perhaps you can just go ghouls now. Focus on ghouls. Don't need the graveyard when you got ghouls. And they decrease the stock regeneration from 60 to 45. Oh, I think that's a buff, I think. Does that mean there was a 60-second cooldown on being able to purchase them, and now it's a 45-second cooldown? I'm not entirely sure, but that doesn't really matter too much, that one. Night Elf. Now, this is a race that gets hurt quite hard by this patch, but they get buffs in other ways that don't matter so much. A bit like the humans with the gyrocopters. So the Demon Hunter, they reduced his agility from 22 to 21. A massive change. Not really. Reduced the metamorphosis duration from 60 to 45. Killing the Demon Hunter at the end of its metamorphosis no longer prevents metamorphosis from being used for the rest of the match. That's a funny glitch. Very rarely would ever happen. Yeah, this is a necessary change though, Demon Hunter. It's not really fixed the problem with Demon Hunter as far as I'm concerned. I think his armor is too high. And he gets his armor from agility, so perhaps he needs to reduce agility by 2 as well. He's just like the Blade Master, where he's just a little bit too strong at the start. Just a little bit too tanky, a little bit too invincible, a little bit too easy to get in there, do tons of damage, and then walk away on 1 health and probably survive because your armor is so high and damage is so low at the low level of the game. So this is nice to see. Metamorphosis, if a Demon Hunter gets to level 6, he almost deserves it. But the problem with Metamorphosis is if he gets to level 6, you can't fight Metamorphosis unless you have a huge advantage over your opponent. What happens is as soon as your opponent goes into Metamorphosis, you run. Your base might get destroyed. You have to say, alright, Mr. Demon Hunter, you can have my base, but I cannot fight you because there's no situation where fighting you whilst you've got Metamorphosis active is going to be beneficial to me. Because he does so much damage, it's chaos, it's splash, and he's got such a high regeneration rate that he's pretty much unkillable whilst he's got Metamorphosis active. Because even if you do get him down to like almost no health, he can walk away because he's very quick as well when he's in it. So this just means that he's not going to be quite so strong for so long once he's got it. Keeper of the Grove getting another buff. Remember, he got a lot of buffs from patch 1.29. So reducing his mana cost from 125 to 100 is a huge deal. Because it means that Night Elf players probably just won't go for Fawn's Aura now and focus solely on Entangle. They can actually go Force of Nature and Entangle, and it will be quite effective at picking off units and harassing enemy mineral lines. I keep calling them mineral lines. Economy lines, I suppose. Yeah, that's just nice for the Keeper of the Grove. He's quite strong, really. He's a very underrated hero, in my opinion. So I don't know if he needs it, but Force of Nature is pretty crappy, so I kind of understand that. Units, upgrades, and items. Archers. Increased the hit points from 245 to 260. 15 more health. Huntresses actually get Sentinel researched by default. So it means that whenever you pick up a Huntress, or get a Huntress, you can now activate your Sentinel ability, which gives you permanent vision on a tree, around the tree, so to speak. It's like a little mini sentry ward that can only be placed on a tree. You can get rid of it though by destroying the tree. So if you see a Night Elf put a Sentinel down on a tree, send a peon to attack that tree and it will get rid of it. But typically, you won't always be in a position where you can destroy the tree. So this is pretty good for Night Elf players that go mass Huntresses, which a lot of them still do actually. And they go quite heavy into Huntresses sometimes, particularly versus human players. So on maps like Twisted Meadows, they'll get like up to 10 Huntresses quite comfortably. So they're going to have like 10 Sentinels, mini permanent sentry wards around the map, which is going to give them so much control. I don't know if this needs to be researched by default. I think you could have just made the research cheaper if that was a concern. Because it costs like 50 gold and 100 wood, and 100 wood is a lot of resources, which is why they don't typically research it. So if you made it 50-50, it wouldn't be quite so bad. Moonglaive now unlocks with Tree of Ages. So Tree of Ages is tier 2. Moonglaive is the Huntress tier 3 ability, which splashes or ricochets onto another unit an additional time each time they attack. So it just means Huntresses are stronger than they were before. I mean, sometimes people say Huntresses are bad units, but I don't think they are. I just think they're situational units. They're a bit of a unit where, I mean, if you go back to Reign of Chaos times, it was literally Night Elf Mirror was Priestess of the Moon, Mass Huntress, and the person with the better micro would win. You would just Priestess of the Moon, Mass Huntress, and attack non-stop. So we don't really want to go back to those days where Huntresses are just spammed out again. They do need to be situational where they're very good in certain circumstances, but they're also quite vulnerable. Most units should be like that. I suppose you could say that hunts are bad at tier 2. Not that bad though. Early tier 2, they're still good. Bad at late tier 2, once slow and stuff like that's on the field. But if the Night Elf already has mass Huntresses, reaches tier 2 and then gets Moonglaive. Although to be fair, a lot of them when they go mass Huntresses, they forgo going to level tier 2 because they want to put as many resources into Huntresses. So I think it's not too bad. It's not a huge deal. It really isn't, but it's just a nice buff for Huntress players, and it means a nice buff for Night Elf players, and I don't like Night Elf players. Glaive Thrower, increased bonus damage from 36 to 53 to 51 to 68. That's quite a significant boost, but they are quite terrible. They are called game throwers for a reason. Very, very niche units. Druid of the Talon. This is not enough, in my opinion. Increase the cost from 135 to 150 gold. Does not solve the issue. I said earlier, you could increase the gold cost by 50. They could cost 185 gold. They could cost 195 gold. The Night Elf player would still shit them out non-stop. Particularly versus Orc. It doesn't matter. Even if they cost like up to 200 gold, they would still spam them out like nobody's business. So that doesn't make enough of an impact. It doesn't deal with the thing that makes Druid of the Talon really annoying, which is Cyclone. I don't see any changes to Cyclone. Fairy Fire's really strong, and these are good changes. I had my Tauren Chieftain get Fairy Fired earlier, and I was like, hang on a second. Have I still got Fairy Fire on me? I had to wait for ages. Like, yeah, a whole minute is a long time. Whilst your opponent can see your unit. And this is on a hero. It affects even longer on units. So Fairy Fire is really annoying. It reduces armor, but it gives him vision, which is very important, because having vision on units just basically means you know where your opponent is, which means you know how to creep jack them, or better, how to go and creep safely, because you know where they are. Of course, they can be dispelled, or the person can take that unit away from their group, but typically it's more than one unit, so if they take all of those units, then that person doesn't have much power to push against you anyway. So Fairy Fire was passively, in a way, like a passive-aggressive, very powerful ability. Yeah, Cyclone hasn't been changed. Cyclone is like one of the least fun abilities in the game. I still can't believe it hasn't been changed. It needs to be reduced in some way. It needs to cost more. There needs to be more punishment for it, basically. Because it's just so dull. It can be dispelled, but it's so tedious to fight versus Cyclone. It's by far the least fun. No one complains about Polymorph. No one complains about Cripple. But Cyclone is god tier when it comes to those final upgrades for the casters. So, bloody Cyclone. Hippogriff taming is researched by default. I think this is fine. Night Elves very rarely go Hippogriffs or Hippogriff Riders unless they're sexy time. And he's going to be happy with this, although he didn't seem too happy with the patch changes, but I thought he would be because he plays a lot of Keep of the Grove and a lot of Hippogriff Riders, so he actually got pretty bigly buffed from this. Bigly buffed. So yeah, I think that's fine. It's just tedious. When you get yourself 2 Ancients of War, 2 Ancients of Wind, but one of those Ancients of Wind has to research Hippogriff taming whilst you're building hippos out of the other, it messes up the flow of the even amount of archers and the even amount of Hippogriff Riders you're trying to pull out, so you don't get odd numbers of them. So I think that one is good. Hippogriff Riders just increased health. That matches with the archers' increased health pool, which is nice. 15 health doesn't sound like much, but it does help a little bit. It's good. Makes them slightly less easy to pick off for players. Dryad. Abolish magic. Reduced damage against summon units from 300 to 250. So these are the units that use that abolish magic as well. So they've got their abolish magic reduced. It's not... I feel like Dryads are still really strong, but I wouldn't want to nerf them too much. They're a bit of a win more unit. Once the opponent's got a lot of them, and if they're in that position, they can just crush you, and they control the game. So this is nice to see that they can't obliterate your units quite so easily, but they can still super fast dispel. Like Water Elementals, if we go back up, they can still dispel very easily. 2 dispels still gets rid of a level 1 water elemental. 3 dispels still gets rid of a level 2 water elemental. Doesn't change anything there. 4 dispels still gets rid of 300, 300, 300. So I guess versus level 3 water elementals, it's a change for the better. 250, 250, 250, so 750. Whereas previously they would have killed it on 900 health. So that's nice, because it's really annoying when you're a human player and the night elf just literally runs in, goes, runs out immediately, and boom, there goes your water elementals. Druid of the Claw. This is a necessary change, I think. Some people might be shocked by it. I'm not. Decrease the bonus damage from 29 to 44 and to 25 to 40. So this means that the Druids of the Claw won't be quite so powerful in certain circumstances when they're attacking against a unit that they do extra damage to, such as a unit with medium armor. So versus Spellbreakers, for example, they won't quite obliterate them quite so quickly and easily. Druids of the Claw are really strong. One of the best units in the game for their gold cost and their tier. You know, you get them at tier 2, but the tier 3 upgrade for them doesn't take very long at all. It takes like 40 to 50 seconds to research, and then you've got incredibly powerful melee units that can heal themselves and roar and run away and then be staffed out and then heal themselves with the Moonwells and then come back into battle. So, Mountain Giant. Cool change here. Decrease the cost from 425 to 350. Decrease the supply to 6. I think this makes them a lot more playable now. They're not terrible units as you would think they are. It's kind of scary sometimes when your opponent gets Mountain Giants. If they get 2 or 3 of them. Because if they're microed correctly, they don't really ever die. So it's kind of cool that it makes them a lot more viable. We don't want the games to be too long though, taking an eternity to kill Mountain Giants, armies of Mountain Giants, but I like that they're more accessible now. Chimeras decreased half damage splash radius from 125 to 100. That means that they just won't do so much damage to a large group of units when they're attacking in the middle. It'll be a smaller group of those units. The radius just won't hit quite so far, because their splash is pretty insane. Moonwell, increased mana regeneration at night from 1.25 to 1.5. This is very powerful, because Moonwells are not bad at all. So it means that Night Elves should be abusing the Sentinel Stone. The stone that basically costs 50 gold in the shop, but gives them like an extra 60 seconds or 30 seconds of nighttime. Because that works with Moonwells, and you can mass more Moonwells. It's just good for Night Elf, this Moonwell buff. This is one of the most impressive changes in the game, and I'm so glad, because this is one of the most sensible nerfs I've seen in a long time. Ancient of War, reduced the hit points from 1,000 to 900. That's not so relevant. Just means they're a little bit less tanky. This is what's important. Reduce the bonus... Oh, Moonstone. Okay, thank you there, Mercy. Reduce the bonus attack damage from 44 to 36. So, it's not that much of a change. It's 8 damage, but it's kind of like 25% less damage, 20% less damage, which just means they won't be able to solo creep camps quite so quickly as they do. They'll still be able to do it because they're tanky as hell, and the most important ability that they have is Eat Tree, which heals them for 50 health, I think, every second. And most creeps don't do enough damage. They do probably like 70 to 80 damage per second. So with a Wisp or 2 repairing and Eat Tree, you can take on almost any creep camp in the game. So this means that if you're doing the creeping, it's going to cost you more gold and lumber. More investment for repairing that Ancient of War, because you won't be able to creep the camp so quickly and easily, because Night Elves are very scummy. They'll get 1 Demon Hunter, they'll get 1 Archer, they get 1 Ancient of War, and then straight tech to tier 3 pretty much. And creep a decent portion of the map whilst doing it, so this slows them down. And it's good, because they shouldn't be able to just tech straight up and still be as fast as the other races when it comes to creeping. It doesn't make sense. Why should a human player have to get like 5 to 6 footmen and creep basically at the same pace if not just a little bit faster than Night Elf that builds one archer. Okay, Ancient Protector. Reduced the build time from 60 to 55 seconds. Decreased the rooted cooldown. So when they're rooted, they now attack 0.3 seconds faster. So it's effectively 29 DPS instead of 25. And when they're uprooted, they now do 21 instead of 19. So this is an extra 4 damage per second, effectively. Doesn't take them quite so long to build. It's a nice touch for them. I don't know if it really still solves the Night Elves problem in terms of defense, but it's certainly very good for them because they typically will use them aggressively, particularly those Night Elf players that go mass, like Beastmaster, Mass Huntress. Put 3 to 4 Ancients inside of your base, preferably when you not spot them at night time, and then basically attack your base relentlessly. And now imagine they can attack faster. They're more powerful than they were before. Huntresses got buffed. Ancient Protectors got buffed. So that strategy that was already strong is now stronger. Chimera Roost no longer requires Ancient of Wind to build. I get it, but it's not really a huge issue. It's interesting though, because it means that Night Elf don't have to go down a linear path, which they did before. They don't have to get Ancient of Wind and then invest into Talons and say, okay, well I can't get Ancient of Law now. They can go Ancient of Law and still fit in Chimeras. So you might see some sort of strange amalgamation of Night Elf games in the late game, 1 versus 1, where they go Bears into Dryads, into Chimeras, and somehow make that work. Because I have seen games in 1 versus 1 where the Night Elf will slowly, if the game goes on long enough, transition into Chimeras. Also, I'm pretty sure Chimeras misspelt. It should be an A here, shouldn't it? Unless I'm thinking of a different type, but I'm not going to worry about that. Neutrals. So the heroes, the Goblin Alchemist. His healing spray was crazy when it got buffed. So this is just to tame it a little bit. I'm not sure what it was before the buffs, so this almost seems like it's put it back to where it was. 70 to 60, 55 to 45, 40 to 30. So it might have actually been kind of reduced to where it was. It's still really strong because it doesn't affect enemy units, but that's a bit of a hit. But I think it's a necessary one because Goblin Alchemist wasn't that much fun to watch. You know, the GCS games, Infi versus Foe, Human Mirror, both of them got Goblin Alchemist. It was a bit like watching a Night Elf Mirror, where they got mass bears and they just rejuvenate each other and the fights go on for eternity. Oh, thank you very much there, Herc Speedy. Thank you for the sub. True. Yeah, so I think this is fine. It was a bit of a boring thing to fight versus.
Undead imbalance reaches an all-time high. Let us all join the cult of the damned and serve our undead overlords.
I am sanctified. Yes, the acolytes are loving this patch. Okay, transmute. So what this means is you no longer get, you know, 0.8% of the 0.80% of the gold cost. So if you transmuted a unit that cost 100 gold, you get 80 gold from it. Now you get 125 gold. So you actually make profit. So if you did it on a Frostworm, which cost 385 gold, I'm not going to do the math, but basically you'd probably get something like 465 gold from it. So it's pretty nice. Transmute wasn't terrible, and now it's better. Goblin Tinker, reduced the armor from 4.5 to 3.5. So 22.3% sounds like a lot, but that's just the base armor, isn't it? So the Tinker, as he powers up, will get more and more armor through the game. So I think it's an initial nerf to the Goblin Tinker. And a lot of you might be somewhat confused by that, because there's really only a few people in the world that can use Goblin Tinker incredibly well, and that's the human players, Infi and Foe. They devastated Night Elves in the GCS with Goblin Tinker. I could not do that. I would just fall apart if I went Goblin Tinker, because he seems like a straightforward hero, not too complicated. You put down a pocket factory, you harass, you right click, there's not much to it. But there is a method to the madness, and it needs to be played very specifically. So it's funny how he got nerfed, basically because of those two players. Because I pretty much don't see Goblin Tinker get used otherwise. Because Night Elves use him versus Orc at tier 3 as their third hero, but that armor's not going to make much of an impact there. Pocket Factory is more interesting though. Now has heavy armor instead of normal, which means that it's going to get absolutely obliterated by casters. So if you've got mass Sorks, you could focus fire it and kill it instantaneously, because they do like 200% damage to heavy armor. When it had normal armor, it would take extra damage from normal damage. I think, actually, I'm not entirely sure normal armor. Is it medium armor or normal armor? But anyway, I think this is a bit of a nerf to Pocket Factory. Easier to kill in my opinion. They've increased the spawn interval for Clockwork Goblins, so they don't spam out quite so much. That's good, because they're pretty powerful to be frank. And this is level 1, level 2, level 3 of his passive, which increases the rate of them. So, yeah, a little touch here and there. Clockwork Goblins. Can I share the patch notes with a link? Yes, I can. That'll be in the video description as well. There you go. Cluster rockets increase the damage, so they still want cluster rockets to be a thing. It's a small change, but moving towards this, and that's level 3. That's not even the change of the level 1 and 2. Hey, Sack Roger, thank you very much there for the sub. Thank you for that. Naga Sea Witch. Now, this is a huge buff, sorry, to Mana Shield, but it's still not going to get picked. It's increased damage absorbed from 1 to 2. Oh, Kamababo, thank you as well very much for the resub. 21 months. Just let the game die already, he says. So you don't have to do any more 4 versus 4 RT and get focused. Is that what it is, Babu? Increased damage absorbed from 1 to 2.
Just let the game die already.
Doesn't look like it with these changes. Unless they buff Orc anymore, then no one's going to want to play. Because everyone's going to be playing Orc. Even I'm switching to Orc. Increased damage absorbed by 1.5 to 3. Increased damage to 2 to 4. That's double. That's double the amount at level 3. If you ever get into a game where you have a level 10 Naga Sea Bitch, this is actually pretty strong. So it's a strange change. I would almost actually rather see Mana Shield be changed to a different spell. But would people still pick it? Because Frost Arrows and Fort Lightning are just insanely good. That it only makes sense that you just pick those 2 abilities. And then at level 7, maybe you consider Mana Shield because you have no other choice. That's the only other thing you can pick at level 7. So it doesn't really change anything, that. Pandaren Brewmaster, Aventador. He's most affected by this, and Todd. Breath of Fire. All levels increased mana cost from 70 to 75. Alright, so it's just a tiny increase to the mana cost, which is already dirt cheap. But the thing that changes really here is the reduced damage over time from 7 to 5 seconds. So it doesn't actually do damage for so long over time. And it reduces the max. So I think you're going to see more pandas going Breath of Fire and Critical Strike than getting the Drunken Brawler, Drunken Haze. I'm not entirely sure though. Reduce the max damage from 520 to 480. So the max damage is being reduced quite significantly at level 2 and 3, as you can see, because the panda's capability with Breath of Fire is insane. He just walks in, Breath of Fire, walks out, and at the mid-game onwards, you will probably have 1080 health of units at least to absorb that Breath of Fire. So this is why the max damage is being changed, because it is incredibly strong. It's an instantaneous AoE that does a bucket load of damage. Most AoEs have to be channeled or cast for a long time or positioned or have a delay to them. This one is instantaneous and shockingly cheap. Like, it's been increased, and the increase is to 75. 75 is nothing. I thought it should be changed to 85 or even 90 personally because of how powerful it is. But at least this helps a little bit. It's going to be a bit of a struggle though, because in 4 vs 4 RT games, I always pick him if I think the human player is going to go tanks. So I won't be able to do quite so much damage to mass tanks. But then again, there won't be quite so many tanks because they cost an extra 1 supply. So perhaps it all works out. Units, buildings, and upgrades. Cannibalize creeps. Change from 10 to 12. That's not really important. Reduce the damage to summon units from 400 to 200. This is huge. I didn't think I even noticed this the first time I looked at these patch notes. You know when you're creeping, there's a lot of wizards and oh, I can't remember the other creature that does it, but there's a lot of creatures that can basically potentially purge your units, your summons, which are really important in the early game for actually... Oh, gnolls, that's it. Gnoll wardens, thank you. I couldn't remember what it was. Yeah, you got quite a lot of the bandit wizards and the gnoll wardens. And, yeah, when they hit your water elemental for like 400 damage, you're like... Oh, it's gone from like 550 health to 150 health. Like, just like that. Oh, that hurt. So now, it means that they only do 200 damage, which isn't anywhere near as bad. So this is going to be more emphasis for players with summoned heroes that summon. So even Firelord might be more fireable now as a first hero just because of something like this. You don't have to worry about your lava spawn instantly getting killed or something like that. Items. Boots of speed now have a stock of 2. I think this is changed because it's one of those situations where both players will rush to the shop and the Blade Master will walk in and get the boost of speed before the Archmage can. And then the Archmage is left without a boost of speed and he's screwed. Because the Blade Master now has a boost of speed and can chase the Archmage down even easier. So I think it's specifically for like partly that kind of reason or those circumstances. So now both players can just buy the boost of speed and don't have to worry about getting right-clicked by a Blade Master. So this is actually a bit of a nerf to Blade Master specifically, as far as I'm concerned. If I'm looking at this, I'm thinking this changes Blade Master the most, because he just can't kill an enemy hero so easily now by getting that boost of speed. Book of the Dead. Change the number of skeleton warriors and archers from 4 to 3, and they changed the health. Oh, they actually increased the health. I'm surprised. But the nerf is there. It's still a bit of a make or break item that can win you the game in the right circumstance, because it's a huge power spike to have what was 8 but now 6 of these skeleton warriors and archers just suddenly part of your army at the start of the game. Map pool changes. Okay, so we can just... you can gloss over these. The things to take from 1 versus 1 is Concealed Hill, Northern Isles, and Swamped Temple. I think the maps that have come out would have been that Road to Stratham map, because I don't see that in here. What else came out, actually? I'm just going to log on to Battle.net. Just to take a look at the 1 versus 1 pool, just to see what did come off. Being told they removed Road to Stratham, 2 Rivers. Ah, 2 Rivers finally got removed. So, Plunder Isle's still a thing. So, Road to Stratham's got removed. 2 Rivers. Tirisful Glades is still there, though. I don't think anyone likes that map. I'm surprised Tirisful Glades is still there. Floodplains got removed. That wasn't a terrible map, but it was weird. I think this is better, though. The changes... this is better. Yeah. I think you guys are going to be happier with these maps. As for 2v2, I don't know. I'm not going to go into too much detail on that. 3v3, the same with that. 4v4, I don't think it's changed, has it? I'm pretty sure 4v4 is still the same maps. Those all look like the ones that were there before. And free-for-all probably hasn't changed. So, let's take a look at the map changes. Amazonia, they just made it so that they reduced the number of Wand of Illusion and Sentry drops, which is kind of important with the Sentry, because it's quite a small map, so Sentry Wards is very powerful. Avalanche, I've never liked Avalanche anyway. That's a 2v2 map, basically, with the Fountain of Health in the middle for both players. Both teams, rather. Swapped Mercenary Camp with the Fountain of Health. So the Fountain of Health is now on the middle to the left and the right instead of the middle and the top and the bottom. Did they ever come back to you about Road to Stratham? No, they didn't, Nick. But it has been viewed. I'm aware of that, but I didn't get any more additional feedback, unfortunately, Nick. Bridge too near. Relocated Creek Camp to prevent accidental aggro. So that's good. because Bridge Too Near has very strange creeps, particularly the ones in the middle. So I don't know if they've done it with the middle creeps. Concealed Hills, they've cleaned up this map. We're going to take a look at a couple of the few free new 1 versus 1 maps. Ferrolas, that's for 4 versus 4 RT. They've just made it so gold mines and creeps don't aggro so easy. Columns in the Mist, relocated the 2 mercenary camps further to prevent accidental aggro. Yeah, you did aggro on those, but not very easily. It's only the top one that would aggro, really. Cleaned up the tree placement. No big deal. Phantom Grove, never liked that map, especially not since the changes anyway. Red camps are harder now. Not a big deal. Swamp Temple. Looks like this map has undergone quite a few changes. We'll take a look at that one. It's a weird one. We'll get to that one last. Tyrannis Stand, more building area. That's very important because I always complained about that. Is it always felt like you was very blocked in your own base in Tyrannis Stand on the outside. Just felt like you couldn't put the buildings in a way that would benefit you. It would always hamper you. Swapped the creep camps at the expansion, so now the expansion nearby you is easier because they made changes where the inner expansion, the ones in the middle for both players, was really tough because of the assassins with their poison damage. So if you crept it with militia, you just get poisoned to high hell. 2v2 maps are the same. Did Lost Temple come back into the 2 versus 2 ladder pool? I think it might have done. Level 8 no longer aggros. That's nice. That was always funny. And very annoying when he would just randomly polymorph one of your units. Swap the mercenary camp location with a green camp. These buildings are now further away from their start locations. Oh, okay. That's interesting. Because the merc camp is quite close. That's good for my Blade Master. Creep jacking then. Fixed pathing around the mercenary camps, so that means that when you pick up a merc, it's not going to get trapped, probably, between the trees. And Twilight Ruins. Swap the remaining goblin laboratories on the outside of the map with the goblin merchants at the center. Yeah! Yeah! This was always so annoying, the Twilight Ruins. You would, if you wanted to go and get yourself a town portal in the mid to late game, and your opponents were pressuring an ally and your ally had no more town portals left, you would have to go to the side or the top. You know, you'd have to go to the outskirts of the map to get a town portal, which is just super unrealistic. The center creep camps that drop level 1 permanent items now drop level 1 power-ups. Okay. Well, there it is. Not a big deal. Alrighty. So those are the patch notes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a quick look at the new maps for 1 versus 1. So if you join me for that, and then we'll finish things off. This has probably been quite long, but I tried to keep this relatively short. What you're looking at is Concealed Hill. So this is a 1 versus 1 ladder map now, on the PTR at least. Here's the player spawn position here. It actually looks like a pretty well-rounded map. You've got your shops in the middle. But more interestingly, you've got this gold mine in the middle, which is very unusual for most maps. There is an expansion near-ish by, but not unattainable by the opponent if they're going down the left flank or the right flank. They've actually got Fountain of Healing. I'm not so sure about that, because Fountain of Healing is always a bit controversial in 1 versus 1. Bit of a power spike, but there are some very, very strong creeps by it. Level 26, so okay. That's going to be really hard to creep. Yeah, that's kind of cool, I guess. The middle creep camp drops a level 5 permanent item, which is pretty cool, because you'll see some really strong stuff. Interesting drop rate on this Ogre Magi. Wand of Illusion. Oh, it doesn't show you. I'm going to just swap over, actually, to a new window that shows you everything. There we go. Okay. So, we have Wand of Illusion, Replenishment Potion, and Sentry Wards as this strange percentage chance. Rather than just random level 1 creature drop. Maybe the map needs to be changed a little bit? This is odd. I guess it's kind of the same thing, though. It's just how it's presented. Yeah. So, that's first looks at Concealed Hills. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but overall, looks like a pleasant map. The middle is like the kind of high ground. Looks like a lot of pathing to sort of like walk around. Enough open spaces for battles for the orcs. that they don't get too screwed. But again, positions where you can put yourself into a closed off position versus orc large armies. So that looks good. And the players are... It's like a decent Plunder Isles or something. It's more located in the same vicinity. You don't have to go quite so far out of your way. It looks like wherever you go, you're going to be doing something on the map for the most part. So I quite like that. Let's take a look at Northern Isles. Oh, yes. I think FilmTing created this map. Very talented map creator for Warcraft 3. Doesn't get enough credit. Does have a YouTube channel. FilmTing07, I think. I'm not entirely sure. But I'm pretty sure they created this map. Level 2 permanent item here. Nearby creek camp. It's a nice tile set. Always very gorgeous. Always very thematic. So 2 light green camps nearby. Even more sort of light camps. As you progress towards the middle, you get to more interesting stuff. There is only one shop though, but with the boost of speed being... Ah! I kind of like that boost of speed change now. Although the only downside is invulnerability potion. I think it's dangerous to have that be a potential to have 2 invulnerability potions, like 2 boosts of speed. But what I like about the 2 boosts of speed means that you could potentially have the marketplace instead of 2 goblin shops. Do you see what I mean? Because typically if you had one, you have to have another one to match it. But now this means we might be able to fit more marketplaces in more maps, which means more potential random items that could drop, which is more potential fun. You don't always get to see those items though, because mostly in free-for-all games where gold is more abundant, because in 1 versus 1 those items are pretty expensive, so you pretty much wouldn't get them anyway. But it would be cool if gold was a bit more splendorful, then you could go crazy and buy some more crazy stuff. But this is like a nice looking centralized map with decent pathing. Quite large open areas though. Perhaps it benefits Orc a little bit more. Looks a little bit like Amazonia to some degree. It doesn't look like it, but I'm seeing some sort of like resemblances in my own mind's eye. Natural expansion, not too far away, not too bad. Could get in a position to defend it. I think it's pretty reasonable, this map, and I think it will be quite welcome on the ladder pool. We'll see how the feedback is though. And we'll move into our last map, which is probably the most controversial one. Swapped Temple. This one is just strange, but I'm open to trying it out. You spawn here or here. It's got that kind of asymmetrical feel to it, where technically it is symmetrical, but at the same time it really doesn't feel like it. Like, I'm not so sure actually looking at this. Okay, so that's the natural expansion for you. And that's the natural expansion for you. So both players kind of push out towards the northeast. So it's got this kind of really weird feel where it's not like most other maps. And then they've got 1 gold mine between both the players at the southwest. Again, you have all this lovely pathing where you can roll around in through the trees. You've got this strange creek camp here in the middle. I don't know about that one. It just kind of looks like it gets in the way. You've got this high ground area nearby a base. You could have a tower there. You probably can't actually because of the doodads. Yeah, you can't actually. They're blocking. But it's a really weird map, but it looks kind of cool. So I think this will be the more strange one of the group. It folds in line from left bottom corner to top right corner. Yeah, basically a lot of maps you might sort of divide it in a line from top to bottom or left to right, but in this one it's sort of diagonally sort of folded. It's got such a strange vibe about it. Like the top right, the shop, the merc camp, and then this really strong turtle camp over here. It's cool. I like it. But I don't know how much I'm going to enjoy playing it. I might enjoy spectating it more, but we'll see. Alright then, thank you guys very much. Those are the patch notes. Please let me know what your thoughts are. I'm going to shut this down now, and you guys have a good day. I'll have a link to the patch notes as well in the video description as well, if I remember, so you can go check them out for yourself, make your own opinions. You can test these patches out, this patch out live on the PTR currently, although I don't think it'll be long before it becomes onto the live servers, because the last one didn't. And I don't think there's even going to be that many people playing on the PTR, even when a new patch comes out. I just don't see it. I'm not playing on the PTR. I'm not even interested. I'll just wait till it comes out on live. So there you go. Take care, everyone. Have a good one. Bye. All right, I'm coming out of all of that. I'm gonna